Julie had always dreamed of becoming a doctor. It was a dream that she had harbored ever since she was a young girl, and no matter what obstacles came her way, she always remained determined to make it a reality. Throughout her teenage years, she worked hard in school, consistently earning top grades in all of her science and math classes. She was always the first to volunteer for extra credit projects, and she even spent her summers shadowing doctors at the local hospital to get a feel for what the profession was really like. Finally, after years of hard work and dedication, Julie was accepted into medical school. It was a dream come true, and she threw herself into her studies with renewed determination. As she made her way through the grueling coursework, Julie met another medical student named Marcos. He was smart, kind, and driven, and the two of them quickly became fast friends. As they spent more and more time together, they realized that they had a deep connection, and before long, they were inseparable. After they graduated from medical school, Julie and Marcos decided to get married. It was a beautiful ceremony, filled with love and joy, and as they exchanged vows, they knew that they were meant to be together forever. As the years passed, Julie and Marcos both excelled in their respective fields. Julie became a successful pediatrician, working tirelessly to help children stay healthy and happy, while Marcos became a renowned cardiologist, traveling the world to lecture on the latest advances in heart health. Despite their busy schedules, Julie and Marcos always made time for each other. They loved to travel, trying new foods, and experiencing different cultures. And they always returned home with a renewed sense of appreciation for their life together. As they approached their 10-year anniversary, Julie and Marcos began to think about starting a family. They had always dreamed of having children, and they felt ready to take on the challenge of parenthood. After months of trying, they finally received the great news that Julie was pregnant. They were overjoyed, and they spent the next 9 months preparing for the arrival of their little one. When the big day finally arrived, Julie and Marcos were a little nervous but excited as they made their way to the hospital. It was a long and grueling labor, but finally, after many hours of hard work, Julie gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. As they held their daughter in their arms for the first time, Julie and Marcos knew that they were the luckiest people in the world. They were filled with love and gratitude, and they knew that this little person was going to change their lives in the most amazing ways. In the months that followed, Julie and Marcos were incredibly busy, taking care of their newborn daughter and working hard at the hospital. They were tired, but they were also happier than they had ever been. They had a family, and they were living their dream of helping others through their work as doctors. After the birth of their daughter, Julie and Marcos were both exhausted. They were used to working long hours at the hospital, but taking care of a newborn was a whole different level of tired. Despite their love for their little girl, they found themselves feeling overwhelmed and in need of a break. So after a few months of parenthood, they decided to take a short trip together. They hired a nanny to stay with their daughter at their home, and they packed their bags for a much-needed getaway. As they enjoyed their time together, Julie and Marcos called the nanny every day and night to check on their daughter. They wanted to make sure that she was safe and happy, and they wanted to be able to speak to her as much as possible. But one day, the nanny didn't answer their calls. They tried repeatedly, but no matter how many times they called, there was no answer. They were worried and concerned, but it was late at night, and they were very far away, so they couldn't do much. They asked a friend to go check on their house and see if everything was okay. When he arrived, he rang the doorbell, but no one answered. He peered through the windows, but the house was dark and quiet, with no sign of anyone inside. Julie and Marcos were terrified. They couldn't believe that their baby was alone and in danger, and they knew that they had to get home as soon as possible. They booked the first flight back and raced to the airport, their hearts heavy with worry. As they flew home, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. They prayed that their daughter was safe and that they would be able to get to her in time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they landed back in their hometown. They rushed to their house, their hearts racing with fear. When they arrived, as they entered the house, Julie and Marcos were met with a scene of pure horror. Their baby was lying on the floor, completely silent and still. They were shocked and nearly fainted with fear. They rushed to their baby's side, their hearts racing with worry. As they got closer, they realized that the nanny was nowhere to be found. They had no idea where she had gone or what had happened to their baby. With shaking hands, they picked up their little girl and cradled her in their arms. She was unconscious, and they were terrified that they were too late. They knew that they had to get her to the hospital as quickly as possible. As they rushed to the hospital, Julie and Marcos were filled with a mix of fear and hope. They prayed that their baby would be okay and that they would be able to find out what had happened. When they arrived at the hospital, they were met by a team of doctors and nurses who took their baby away to be examined. Julie and Marcos waited anxiously in the waiting room, praying for good news. After what seemed like an eternity, the doctors returned with good news. Their baby was going to be okay. She had fainted due to a lack of oxygen, but she was stable now and showing signs of improvement. Julie and Marcos were overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. They couldn't believe that their baby was going to be okay, and they were filled with a sense of joy that they had never known before. From that day on, Julie and Marcos never hired a nanny again. They were too scared of something like this happening again, and they knew that they couldn't trust anyone else with the safety of their child. Instead, Julie made the difficult decision to quit her job as a pediatrician. She knew that she needed to be home to take care of her baby, and she was willing to make any sacrifice to keep her safe. As the years passed, Julie and Marcos watched their daughter grow and thrive. They were grateful to have each other by their side, and they knew that they would always be there to protect and love their little girl. Despite the challenges they faced, Julie and Marcos were happier than they had ever been. They had each other, and they had their beautiful daughter, and that was all that mattered. The end.